Welcome back. Told you it wouldn't be long, and we are going to get on with the first match. As you can see there at the bottom of your screen, it's Ukraine versus Denmark. Priest banned for Ukraine, and the Hunter has been banned from Denmark. So, oddly enough, we're going to have some shamans in this match. But that's not the full story, Galen. Not getting your shaman banned when you don't protect it's good.
Well, what's really interesting is that Denmark decided to protect their druid, and it's not a normal quest druid. It is a combo quest druid. They have Floop's Glorious Gloop, they have Elise, and what they're trying to do is make a lot of pounces in the end game to just kill the other person outright with like a 30 damage pounce combo. So it's really cool to see that they actually protected it, and they're queuing at game 1 versus Nyria's N'Zoth Warrior.
That's the matchup they want, at least in my opinion. It could be a long one because there'll be a lot of posturing, but the druid does just get that value, and especially when it's playing the combo at the end.
Yes, it has the Elise Baleful Banker combo, which we've seen kind of decimate warriors when it gets to the late stages of the game. So what Nyria's focus should be, I believe, is try to get an early N'Zoth and just pressure out the druid as soon as possible. I think if he tries to make it go to fatigue, it's going to be a real struggle for him because, combo druid just doesn't really get fatigued.
Yeah. It's very difficult indeed with the bankers, with copying the bankers. If you don't do that, but you want to copy the bankers, you can. There's so many options you have at the end of the game if you keep everything together. But the difficulty is also, of course, the middle game. They've still got to withstand quite an onslaught from most of the druid cards, as well as try and get that N'Zoth sorted out.
And I mean, Fury Hunter just starts off with pretty much one of the best hands possible. Double Crystal Merchant early on is like insane versus warriors specifically because they don't really pressure you in the early game, and when decks don't really pressure you, that means they're also not really fighting for boards. So stuff like Crystal Merchant often gets unanswered, or if it does get answered, they have to use really primo removal spells like Shield Slam to do so. So from Fury Hunter's side, I think he's in a really good spot already, even though it's just turn 1 of the game.
Yep, they managed to vote turn 1 with quite a big decision actually. This is why turn 1 obviously you get the quest going quicker, but you don't get your merchants going, so they have to even consider turn 1. Do you want to tick up or not on the quest, or do you want to save it until turn 2 and then get an extra card?
Behold, jewels of the
But this is the normal way forward. Get that quest completed.
Nyria probably responds with a Restless Mummy. Clearing Crystal Merchants is what you want to do.
Yeah, and the pressure they're getting on board, although it's not particularly relevant in terms of killing the druid, does mean the druid will be able to draw fewer cards. They're going to have to actually respond to the stuff going on the board rather than just cycling through their deck. If they draw any card draw, that is. Because this is quite irritating.
Yeah, Fury Hunter would like to draw as many cards as possible. He wants to find a Nourish for turn 6 or even turn 5 since he has this Innervate, but we're starting to look at a turn where he might have to deviate from just the pure draw game plan. Bees on the Restless Mummy, for example, clears away not a lot of the pressure that Nyria has, but it gives a board of Fury Hunter, which he needs to stay alive, I would say.
Yeah, trying to work out whether he can use his Innervate with a Crystal Merchant and a Hero Power just to tick off the Mummy. Ready for something bigger going forward, Starfall for instance. I think they're playing Swipe as well. Just double checking. No, they're not. There's no space.
For the combo from Fury Hunter's side, he does need to save 1 Bees if he wants to do like the late game Elise the Bees and then kill your Elise with the Floop's Glorious Gloop. It's very confusing when we get to that point, but he does need to save 1 Bees for that.
Yeah, I think it's easier when you know it than the old Topsy combo for Priest, but the first time you're actually trying to work it out in your head, it's a lot more complicated, even than the Topsy combo. That was mechanically difficult, but fairly straightforward to understand. This one is just crazy. If you don't get the right number of Elises and Bees going on, you run out of mana by accident.
It's pretty cool to see decks like that, though, in Hearthstone, where, getting the reps in isn't just about playing games. It's about actually, like, practicing the late-game combo. I think that's one of the things that's really cool about Hearthstone compared to other games with, like, infinite combos is the fact that Hearthstone is very much limited by the turn timer. So you actually start seeing stuff like APM matter in the late game. I remember,
Yeah.
like, when you're talking about Topsy-Turvy, there was a Topsy-Turvy simulator that came out when that deck was available, and you could, like, set up boards of Void Lords and Annoyatrons, and people were, like, bragging about how many Annoyatrons they could get through in the 75-second turn limit, or time limit. So it is interesting to see this style of deck, this APM heavy style deck, really reward players for just practicing the combo as much as possible. That's not really something that we normally see in Hearthstone.
It's a really valid point. I once qualified for a big tournament in a different card game, and the guy I beat in the semi-finals complained because my turns were taking 20 minutes. It wasn't like having a go at me, he was just complaining the deck shouldn't exist, not me. Because you had to sort of carefully count everything and lay it out on the board, and a turn took 20 minutes, and that's just not a place you want a card game to be. And it does limit some of the silly things as well that can happen in other games. Just having that turn time means that some combos that would be infinite just can't be played.
Behold, jewels of the sound.
I mean, even in Hearthstone, like, there's so many examples of that, right? Specifically with this, like, kind of combo OTK Druid, if you just had 20 minutes to do your turn, this deck would probably be the best one in the game, because you could just deal 500 damage and get through your opponent's board. But since the turn limit is in place, this deck loses a lot of its power level. Fury Hunter picks up one of the most important cards, I would say. Nourish is the nuts, pretty much. When you're playing Quest Druid, you have the quest activated, and you're playing against a slow deck like Control N'Zoth Warrior. Nourish accelerates you in your game plan in so many ways, especially as a combo deck. You get more cards to your deck, you start to cycle for that Elise, and you also get more mana to use for your next couple of turns, both of which are very, very, very important when everything in your deck is so powerful, like a Quest Druid with its activated quest.
Yeah, and who would have thought that after Nourish was nerfed and became slightly less good, that it would just be a staple in one of the most commonly played decks in the whole of Hearthstone. The way things have worked out. These Anubisants are also absolutely disgusting. There would be an element of irritation here for Denmark if they hadn't got this, but now they can just stem any attack and get on with doing what they do best, which is nothing.
Pretty much. Nothing is what they want to have happen. If nothing happens for the rest of the game, then the Druid is going to win.
Double Pyromancer in this deck is of note. I don't think that's particularly common, but in a meta where everybody's playing Shaman, you've just got to give yourself a chance in those games. Especially in the token Shaman.
It looks like they're going to give up the combo and just go for a least baleful way to win the game. So they've decided that they probably played this actually quite a bit and realized, hey, we don't actually need this 32 damage or 36 damage combo to beat the warrior. All we need to do is keep cycling through those Coons that we just see picked up, Starfalls, Elise, and Baleful, and we can get to the late game where you don't even need Zephyrus at a certain point.
Sure.
You know, you're gaining 20 armor per turn, and your opponent's in fatigue. You're clearing their entire board, and you're playing a 7/7 and a 3/4 and a 5/5 every single turn. So it's like, you don't even need the combo at that point. Just cycle through your deck, get that overwhelming. It's also kind of a combo, right? The fact that you can just move these Coon Baleful releases for the entire game.
Yeah. The bit I'm looking forward to as well is just watching them navigate the Hakar that will be played late in the game. Obviously, the way to do it is to fill up your hand and burn out the bloods, but just making sure they get into that position just to see how they navigate as this deck decreases in size.
That is the one wrench in their game plan, right? It is the Hakar. If Nairi gets the Hakar down before they assemble their combo, like you're saying, that is a spot where they could lose.
So I would like to see them keep this hand size up. They might have a turn or two where they do nothing just to burn them. But with the Kuns picking up so much armor, that time is easily bought, as long as they don't do anything, make a misstep. And that's where having two of you helps so much, as long as you're well organised.
Oh, that is a huge pickup.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they only have one overflow in their deck.
They do only have one overflow, yeah. Only one hidden oasis, highlighting that just because they might need the 12 health. It's starting to look like it is literally just Hakar versus the world, though, here.
This should draw them an extra card here. Even though the Acolyte of Pain is technically dead, it doesn't die until the entire Starfall resolves, which means that it'll take that damage even though it's at -2 health. Pretty cool tidbit.
Yeah, it's extremely strange how that works out, but that is the correct way. And Druid's kind of interesting anyway at the moment in HGG because there's 24, 25 cards the same in basically every deck, and it's just a case of how you want to navigate that end game that you were talking about. Do you want to do it with combo? Do you want to do it with infinite Scenariuses? Do you want to have infinite Zephyrus? Do you want to have a bit of everything? But it's pretty much the same for everybody.
Yeah, and then there's also like the whole Malygos package, which I think we've seen kind of not relegated, but like retired. I think Malygos Druid specifically has been seeing less and less play.
Yeah, people seem to be preferring the Pyromancy if they want that early game. Instead of having a Moonfire, you've got a Pyromancy. Just seems a lot better to me.
Earth Mother was busy.
Oh, this is very scary for Nyria.
Yeah.
He does have a Plague of Wrath, but he has no way to activate it cleanly to deal with this entire board.
Yeah, this is one way to stop Hakar as well. Doesn't matter if they Hakar you if you kill them on the return.
Very true. Wow,
It's
this is
pretty unlikely
awful.
that this kills them, but it just takes up so much of the warrior's time at a key part of the game.
Then.
Is Nyria in such a bad spot that he has to do something like Acolyte, zap his own Acolyte, and hope to draw a Brawl off the top?
Yes, I think so. And this isn't really what Denmark were going for. This is just to distract you from doing anything while we draw the rest of our deck. Right?
The other option
As
would be
it's-
something like Weapons Project, Shield Slam, Restless Mummy, and Zap, and then you do proactive stuff to clear the board. But that seems like you're still not dealing with a lot of it. You're leaving, 10 power in play at that point.
Yeah, this is just a bonus for Denmark, and yeah, we can't deal with it, so let's not deal with it. Let's do the thing we have to do to try and win the game.
That's going to give Bloodlust. And that's going to be 50 damage at that point.
We told you this is how the game would go. Absolutely as expected. That's a shame. I feel like we've been robbed of the infinite ending there.
Storyline of when Druid gets those powerful cards when they need them, specifically Nourish against a deck that... The problem with the Zoth Warrior is that it likes to fight fair, and Druid definitely does not like to fight fair. You know what I mean? Druid's window of opportunity, where you want to beat Druid, is the early game. You want to be playing decks like Zoo, Combo Priest, Token Shaman, things that can fight for board very early, because that's the window that Druid gives you. Warrior is not designed at all to deal with that, right? Warrior is designed to armor up, maybe play a 1/2 on turn 1, maybe a Restless Mummy on turn 4, but it really can't contest in the early game.
Yeah, contest Priest, it can contest
The
Token
light
Shaman,
shall
but it
bring
struggles with
victory.
so much else. Not so bad here either, actually.
We see Freddie B on the camera from several days ago.
Yeah, Freddie B, teammate of Huntrace, so he puts in so much work. I remember when Nordavind were at the sort of the height last year, they all credited Freddie B with being the guy that you can always play test with. Not only was he a good player in his own right, but also the guy who was a lot of the glue that keeps it all together in terms of just working hard, which is somebody you always need on a team.
And he hasn't had a bad year this year. He was he missed top 8 on Breakers at Las Vegas. He went 9-3. If he had won one more game, he was in top 8. But still, 9-3 was a very respectable performance. That was in Specialists when we were still playing 12 rounds of Swiss before the top 8. So, I think he's shown some of his stuff this year, and I hope to see that continue in HGG.
Yeah, me too, very, very much so. I know that he takes his Hearthstone incredibly seriously and has always been a little bit unlucky for me in that we all know who he is, but somebody who didn't really hit it into the public eye as much as some of the others. But always a solid performer, just never had that breakout victory.
Quickly.
Is someone injured?
I believe what Freddy wants to do is save this coin for his Wild Pyromancer and draw off the Circle of Healing as soon as possible. There's really nothing that kills a Northshire Cleric turn 2 as a warrior, so you don't really need to protect it with that being sidekick just yet.
You can just psychic inner fire hit them though,
Hey, I got you, friend.
like this.
Yep. It's really powerful. It does lose to one specific hand versus Warrior, which is going to be Weapons Project Shield Slam, but we see Nyria doesn't have that. And it's not often that they do have that. So I like Freddy's just aggressive game plan here. He can still go Wild Pyromancer Coin Circle next turn. He's protected from stuff like a Restless Mummy for another turn, so it's almost guaranteed that he gets this extra card draw from playing the Beaming Sidekick this turn.
Yeah, and the cleric doesn't just become the irritant of healing people and drawing cards, but it's now actually something you've really got to deal with. And Warrior's not equipped in general to deal with it that quickly. So should get the cards they need to sort this hand out. And again, as it actually turns out, yeah.
From Nyria's side, you're kind of in a bad case scenario right now. You can play the Sip Snap, but really all it's going to be doing is like eating up some extra damage, and you're also giving Freddy a card draw. He doesn't know about the Wild Pyromancer in Freddy's hand, but if you can't always expect that, right? Wild Pyromancer Coin Circle, that's unlucky for Nyria for sure.
Yeah, and Freddy gave a little fist bump to the air there, like, yeah, we know they can't really play anything to our cleric, so this is going to work. It's another reason they made the turn 1 play, realizing that Ukraine are good enough not to stop this.
Wow. Injured Tolvir is really massive. It stops the Restless Mummy from killing your Northshire Cleric. Wouldn't surprise me for Freddy to deviate away from just drawing an extra card here with a heal with his hero power and just playing Injured Tolvir to protect against that Restless Mummy. You're still a mana away, or your opponent's still a mana away from getting a Plague of Wrath off. They're only at 4 mana. So even though your board is very weak to that, you don't have to worry about that for another turn.
Yeah. Think about whether they want the cards now or not. Yeah, making sense. Preserving stuff. Worth noting his positioning there was such that it gave him the options, should he want them.
No tomb can hold me.
Nyria is just going to immediately clear this Northshire Cleric.
No tomb can hold me.
Can't fall him. That's the scariest thing from Ukraine side. Extra cards. That's pretty much how Priest wins this matchup a lot of the times. It's either you make a very early, very big minion, which doesn't happen that often because you need stuff like Divine Spirit Inner Fire very early, or you just draw lots and lots of cards. And sure, the warrior can chew through like 1, 2, maybe even 3 boards with stuff like Brawl, stuff like Plague of Wrath, but if you draw 15 cards throughout your deck, doesn't matter how many board clears you have, because you will just be able to reload every single turn. And at a certain point, Warrior's going to run out of stuff. So, from Warrior's side, getting rid of that card draw engine is vital to winning the game.
Yeah, there's so much they've got to get rid of, but like every minion in the deck. And Warrior not that great at dealing with individual minions. Obviously, Restless Mummies helped that a lot, but traditionally it's better at wiping boards than it is at killing big things. Used to be a thing, and still is, where you just play an 8/8 Edwin on turn 3, and if they don't kill it, you just win because they never have any armor to kill it off.
Warrior definitely has sacrificed a lot of its single target stuff for more board clears right now. You know, a lot of their game plan is around AoEing wide boards, which makes sense, right? If the most common deck in the metagame is going to be Token Shaman, which makes wide boards every single turn, that's really where you want your removal package focused on. So it does lose some potency when you're trying to deal with stuff like a single 5/4, for example.
Yeah, I don't think this deck would be being played if it wasn't for Token Shaman being in the meta and the meta being Protect. I know you
has an option to go Warpath, Whirlwind here. I doubt he goes for it, but it is pretty interesting. Probably wants to
he's
save
got
it
the
for
setup
later.
of the... Yeah. Bit more of a question this time. Don't really want to use your second Inner Fire.
I doubt that this is going to be a turn where Freddy loads up the board with a huge Divine Spirit Inner Fire play. I imagine he's very interested in getting card draws going. So stuff like Injured Tolvir, make it big.
Yeah.
Draw some cards.
Yeah. And draw lots of cards. Working out the best thing to heal up. So they're trying to work out what to play around here. Dynamatic, they're trying to work out if it would have been played last turn.
So the one thing that healing your cleric does is it plays around Whirlwind Plague of Wrath. If you start with a Plague of Wrath from Ukraine's side here, and then Whirlwind, you actually get a full clear. Or Whirlwind Plague of Wrath the opposite way. So if they healed the cleric, they deny that. But I do like healing the Injured Tolvir instead. I think just trying to hold up makes sense. And it looks like Freddy B is just going to have lethal, yeah. That silence here is so huge.
Yep, silence, heal up the thing, make it really, really big, and that's the end of the game.
Hey.
Count your mana 100 times.
Yep, that's what they're going for. Freddy's going to make it 2-0 for Denmark versus Ukraine.
Wow, that was quick.
It just shows you the power level of the draw engine. When you get that Wild Pyromancer and Northshire Cleric circle of healing, again, that's really where a warrior is going to struggle, because they can't deal with that overload of cards with these stats. One, that's when they start losing. You know, when they don't have that Northshire Cleric, suddenly the warrior's pretty massively favored, I would say. But since that's not what happened this game, they have to play a taunt to protect themselves. Silence gets in because they drew so many cards that they found the combo, and the game is just over like that.
Token Shaman remaining. We saw the USA not manage to win from 2-0 up, but Token Shaman is just so good, even against Warrior, which is regarded as a counter. There's a reason that the top 100 on ladder isn't full of Warriors, right? It's full of Shamans for a reason. It's because it's the best deck right now.
I mean, even if you have a terrible matchup versus Warrior, which you don't, it's a pretty decent matchup versus Warrior, they still get to fight through two other decks right now. So Denmark has, I would say, arguably the strongest class in the game right now, the strongest deck in the game, and they get 3 chances to win with it. So if I had to put money somewhere, I'd be on Denmark right now, up 2-0 with the ball. So.
Looking very likely, but this is the exact situation I think the USA did manage to lose from. But we are going to have a short break, and then we're going to come back for some Token Shaman action. Well, if you made a cup of coffee for the day to settle down and start watching this, you probably missed the first two games. Denmark flying out to a 2-0 lead, and now they've got Token Shaman left, which is not what you'd expect after a quick start. But yeah, here they go. 3 shots at getting through Ukraine.
I mean, we saw two very quick matches versus a Control Warrior of all things, a deck known for having ridiculously long games. So it's a pretty funny start to the day, especially like you're saying, Evolve Shaman being the last deck. They haven't even played it yet, and that's considered like one of the fastest decks in the metagame right now. So we might be looking at a very quick 3-0 here. That being said, Ukraine is going to be on Control Warrior, and that is one of the few matchups that I would say Shaman is not favored in.
Yeah, and you worded that very carefully. Not favoured as opposed to can't win. It is still capable of just getting that good start and winning the game. And just going straight for chunks of combo is obviously a good start. From the Warrior side, the mulligan's a lot harder. You might need that Plague of Wrath, but you really don't want to keep it in your opener. Weapons Project's kind of good use to start tidying stuff up, but it's too slow if they get the stuff anyway.
I imagine that Nyria is interested in full tossing this hand. Weapons Project is debatable, but I don't really like it. Plague of Wrath comes down a bit too late from the Warrior side to actually make an impact. A lot of times it comes down turn 6 or turn 7 when you need to come down turn 5. Something like Brawl is a lot better because it can actually impact the board on turn 5, which is kind of one of the power turns for Shaman.
Freddy cheering because he's got the frog in his hand with the burst. Yeah. They've got the coin as well, so every chance of getting the early evolve that they're looking for here.
Not the most powerful lackey that they could have gotten, but it's still, I think they're in a really good spot right now. Spirit of the Frog is just so powerful, especially with a Desert Hare in your hand, and when you're on coin, that it's definitely not over, but I think Freddy and Denmark is in a good spot right now.
Yeah, the Brawl should slow down the beating a little bit. They've got Ziliax, they've got Dynamatic, and Dynamatic is just going to be too slow for the Frog, though, and that's the important thing here.
Honestly, though, from Ukraine's side, they actually have a pretty powerful hand. A lot of cards in Control Warrior right now are kind of dead. They have stuff like Nazak, for example, are Kartut Defenders, and those cards just really don't do anything early. But if you notice, their hand is just entirely early game removal, which is all the cards that you want versus Evolve Shaman. So in terms of hands that you could have, I think Ukraine's is up there in terms of power level in this matchup.
Yeah, they're going to be able to remove quite a bit of stuff, but it is going to cost them quite a lot to do it at the same time. Only a 2 in 3 chance of actually getting this evolve, of course. They could draw the other Voltaic. So they're leaving it as late as possible before playing this coin, just in case they whiff here.
One thing to note from Denmark's side is that there's some interesting back and forth on whether you want to play Desert Hare this turn, or if you want to go like Voltaic Burst plus Soul the Murlocs. With that Evolve pickup, I think you just take the power level of Desert Hare Evolve, hope that your opponent doesn't have Brawl, and even if they do, you just do something like still pretty powerful the following turn. But there is actually like an argument here to just go Soul the Murlocs instead. Casting Voltaic Burst would give you guaranteed Soul of the Murlocs, for example.
Yeah, that's what they're thinking about. That's what they're going to do.
Well, they still have the opportunity to go Desert Hare Evolve after this. They might just be casting this to get that Soul of the Murlocs, for example.
There is little time.
Quite irritating for them that they had to zap their own frog. It doesn't do anything now, but it just gets evolved anyway. That's a good one. Actually, it's not great, but it's fine.
I mean, this is still pretty powerful. If the Khadgar lives off this Brawl, they could just go Voltaic Burst and get four elementals, right?
Yeah.
There's actually some like secret stuff that could happen here. And that would be a pretty scary board for Ukraine to have to deal with.
Ball number 1 done.
Even if a 4-drop lives, I think that Denmark has quite a powerful board state here.
This is the price they're paying for having to zap their own frog last turn. Made this turn much more overloaded and difficult to navigate, so kind of missed a turn.
At the same time, a deck that you're missing a turn against, Control Warrior is not one that it really matters. A lot of times they're doing reactive stuff. So, yes, giving them extra turns is bad, but it's not quite as bad as something like another Evolved Shaman or Quest Druid, for example. They're generally pretty reactive. So, yeah, you're pretty unhappy to miss a turn here, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, it just walks into Dynamatic as well. And the main thing with missing a turn is that when you get towards those later turns, sort of 9 onwards or even 8, the warrior starts being able to do 2 things at once. That's the main difference. And they do have a lot more answers coming up to Ukraine. So double Soul of the Murlocs should put Denmark in a good position, but not necessarily immediately.
I wonder.
Denmark might just go for a contest play here, where they could play like a Thunderhead plus a Voltaic Burst, or just Thunderhead Hero Power. This makes a lot of sense. Next turn they can go Thunderhead Voltaic Burst and Soul of the Murloc all in the same turn, which they could not do this turn. But from Nyrea's side, look at this Ziliax. This is just going to be so powerful. And this is kind of where you start missing those turns. That's where it's actually painful. The fact that Nyrea is just going to have a 6/6 in play after this, it's going to be really tough for Denmark to claw their way back into this game, I think.
Yeah, very low on ways through. And the second you start including... We've already seen how difficult it is to jam things into this deck with people having slightly different takes. The second you try and put any sort of silence effect in there, you're just taking away from what the deck does. You just have to accept these games.
I really don't think Denmark would be in a bad spot if they lose this game. This is easily their worst matchup of the 3 that they have to play, and they're still up 2-1.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not quite over yet. They probably get 1 sting in the tail with the Soul of the Murlocs going on. There's no world where that doesn't have to be dealt with at some point.
You're going to opt not to play the Ziliax here. So what that means to me is they are desperately looking through the deck to find a warpath. They know that there's going to be 2 Soul of the Murlocs in Freddy's hand. So just finding a way to answer that is going to be pretty crucial.
If you can delay the Ziliax, you do get the full benefit from the healing as well. On 34, you're unlikely to lose to 1 Bloodlust. It can happen for sure.
We do see the second one.
Points.
We do see the second one picked up from Denmark's side. So, in terms of hand quality that they have at this stage of the game, it's pretty high. It's pretty unfortunate that they don't have 1 more minion in play, as Zero Mana Mogu Flesh Shaper would be so big here.
Yes, be able to clear up the board, which makes such a huge difference in terms of what people hit you with and how much you've got yourself.
And they don't clear they don't clear the Dynamatic. Does this open up a world where Nyrea could just play the Ziliax and not even go for like a AoE, which he doesn't have obviously, but like it gives him a pretty nice play here.
Yeah, I'm just doing some counting. They'd be able to force quite a lot to face with one of the Bloodlusts, like 20-ish, and play another Soul of the Murloc to set up the same play the turn after.
I think that this might be a small error from Denmark's side, actually, to not kill this Dynamatic.
You've got to take some of these off the board. I think Denmark are looking at Bloodlust 1 turn, and then Soul of the Murlocs and Bloodlust again the turn after. And with that in mind, I think they are holding on to this Ziliax. It's kind of cool, because they'll be able to get some healing off the first Bloodlust.
Whoa.
That's a big card. And they saw the Brawl, remember, or a Brawl of the 2, very early on. Tend to fall into the habit of saying the Brawl, because you don't always play around the second of something in a...
I mean,
in a match you're
Warrior
expected to lose anyway.
Warrior using 1 AoE is not that does not mean that they are out of AoEs. They have lots more where those come from.
Plenty of death rattles on various legendaries. This is where you've really got to know your legendary stats.
They have lots and lots of options here.
Imagine you stick with the Bloodlust path for now. Otherwise, you've wasted your Soul of the Murlocs. So the Stormbringer will be like option 3. As they've
Like
used
they're
them
just
all
gonna
up,
load up.
now they're going to do. Yeah, they use the Soul of the Murlocs to do it this way. And of course they get Alakir. That's what the deck does. Not the best roll though from Stormbringer. Doesn't really matter, it's the number of minions that matters. But
This is pretty crazy that Nyria doesn't actually have a clean answer to this board right now. He's drawn through so much of his deck. He even elected to not go for a Ziliax line to punish that Thunderhead, the greed play where they didn't kill the Dynamatic. But you know, he drew an extra 3 cards at this point, and he still does not have a single way to activate this Plague of Wrath. Which from Nyria's side has to be pretty upsetting. Like, at this point, it's quite likely that you would see at least one way of answering this board, but they just don't have it. They had to use that Brawl early, and they do not have a second AoE or an AoE combo to deal with this board.
they've got to mess around just to kill the Alakir. In fact, they choose, not to go that
There's
way.
a Brawl!
Oh, Freddy's unimpressed with that. But they also now know how desperate Ukraine were. They take advantage of that. They can't with the hand they've currently got, obviously.
I mean,
But that always happens.
Desert Hare is a pretty good pickup. In terms of what you'd want, it means that your Sea Giant can still come down and you load up on the board, but...
Yeah, and you're going into turn 10 when you can double Bloodlust.
You're still, compared to the previous board, you're leaving yourself wide open. There's lots of things that can answer Desert Hare that would not have answered a board full of legendaries. And sure, even if a Sea Giant and a 4/4 live at the end of the turn, you're still not going to be pushing enough damage to actually kill the warrior. So that Brawl pickup was
Hare
huge.
and Totem and Soul of the Murlocs and not be misled by the Giant. That way they've got to kill 2 boards, otherwise you get to double Bloodlust, which would be 30 for 5 minions. Plus, obviously, the minions' attack values. It wouldn't quite be lethal, it would be very, very close. But it's a chunky amount of damage if you go that way. Obviously, if you go that way, you don't have a Sea Giant.
Oh, but man,
But this might be your last chance to get a good Soul of the Murlocs.
Man, if you're doing not quite lethal but very, very close, that's not lethal. You're using both of your Bloodlust, and your opponent gets a chance to kill your entire board. So, yeah, you can do 30 damage with this board, but if they're at 35, you don't get a win. You don't get a win for dealing 30 to your opponent if they're at 35. You got to actually kill them.
But that's the worst case, not the worst case, but knowing that your opponent's low on AoE, that's one of the worst case scenarios. You might just be able to get in with this lot on 1 Bloodlust, and if you get in the turn after with even anything, that would chip the final bit of damage off. Anyway, they agreed with me and not you, so I'm right and you're wrong. That's what I'm going with.
Well, no, I agree with them as well. I'm just saying that they're in a very tough spot here because of that Brawl pickup from Nyria. I think it makes a lot of sense to go for the Soul Rock here instead of the Sea Giant. You leave yourself at least a little bit more chance to get gas in the tank.
And next turn you get Sea Giant Bloodlust in some situations, putting the same sort of situation back onto your opponent. And then you do have that lethal. It's just over 2 turns, not 1. Nothing says we haven't got enough cards any clearer than while you're playing 2 Acolytes on turn 10. Yeah, this is the rock and a hard place you were talking about. How do you actually get this done?
It wouldn't surprise me to see Denmark use a single Bloodlust here. It lets you push some damage. You can use this healing totem to clear up one of these Acolytes. I think from their perspective, they really want to be using this mutate as soon as possible on one of these Desert Hares. So, like, if there's a turn where you could just load up as much as possible, this would be it. Something like Hero Power Bloodlust, you trade the healing totem into an Acolyte of Pain and everything else goes face, and then you mutate Desert Hare. I believe that's the Spirit of the Shark, which is not quite what you want. Oh, but a Taunt Totem picked up, though. Well, it doesn't really do anything because they have a weapon to clear. So, Nyria will have the chance to just draw as many cards as he wants. it's looking a bit over. I would say that the Warrior is going to take this 99.9% of the time for this spot.
That's a lot of percentage.
And what it really comes down to is Naria realizing what his game plan is. You know, he drew through his deck as much as possible, and the fact that every single turn that he elected to draw instead of, you know, fight for board, that really gave him that opportunity to get that brawl. If he hadn't drawn a single less card than he did this game, he would not have had that brawl for Freddie B's explosive Stormbringer turn.
Yeah, and this is that Ziliax
Precision.
coming down at a fairly important moment now.
Some great sequencing from Area.
Yeah.
Not trading Zacklights in first, so they don't die to the Plague of Wrath.
And
In this case,
taking
drawing
down
last
the board size. Nice one. Yeah, and that's locked it out pretty much. We'll still see them try and get this wide board.
Looks like we're going to be going to a game 4.
It really does. Trying to work out how to get this double bloodlust to do anything, but they gave themselves a good shot, I think, with setting up the Hares and the Murloc Soul, but not happening here. And the only question here is, when do you Dynamatic? For me, how many cards do you want?
So let's talk about the next couple games. From Ukraine's side,
Okay.
they still have to win with a Hunter and a Shaman. So we're going to be looking at a Shaman Mirror and Hunter versus Shaman. And I feel like Evolve Shaman versus Reno Hunter or Highlander Hunter, it's pretty favored for Shaman, but there's still stuff that the Hunter can do to like claw their way into the game, right? Stuff like Zephyrs is just incredibly powerful, I would say.
Yeah.
A lot of times when Shaman makes a huge board, like they often do, sometimes you can just get something like a Zephyrus Hellfire or a Zephyrus Shadow Flame to answer it pretty cleanly.
Yeah, and you don't have to answer that much, because you start striking back incredibly quickly as the Hunter. The second you get a look in, you do actually start just smashing your opponents up. They can mess around with Soul of the Murlocs and things, but if you're hitting them in 12s and 14s, they don't last very long. But I do agree. I like the token Shaman against everything, because I'd be silly to say otherwise. But they do give that one up. And worth noting as well that Denmark's Hunter does have a Hungry Crab in it, and I'd be interested to see how much difference that makes against Shaman. Just that one eat your Sludge Slurper early on. Kind of interesting.
Hungry Crab would be really good in Hearthstone Battlegrounds right now. I'd say that. There's always Nightmare Amalgams that come down. I'd love to have one of those in that game. So maybe they can introduce Zephyrus Hungry Crab into Hearthstone Battlegrounds, see if it impacts it.
How would Zephyrus even work? It just picks a card it thinks is
Oh, it
good?
wouldn't. I wouldn't. It would not. It would not. I'm just spitballing here.
But halfway through the battle, Zephyrus just goes off and picks a random card. And you just don't know what it's going to do.
Something like that.
We're going to get the mirror match. And this is the one where Kalenta, playing for Ukraine, has got the Totemic Smash. Which means he doesn't have the Totemic Burst.
They have a really powerful hand. Spirit of the Frog and Mogu Flesh Shaper, 2 cards that work incredibly well together and also are fantastic in this specific matchup. Spirit of the Frog is something that your opponent cannot answer, and if your opponent tries to answer by playing for board, Mogu Flesh Shaper comes in and smacks. And a zap?
Yeah.
Like, card quality-wise, Kalento's hand versus Freddie B's hand, Kalento is like 5 times as powerful right now.
5 times as powerful.
Yeah,
That's how you guys work things out. Like
That's the integer number of how much more powerful Kalento's hand is right now.
I'm sitting there going, which play do I make? And the pros are going, this is 3.7 times more powerful than my opponent's hand. So yeah, you can see, the usual irritating interplay here as to, we have a Mogu, so we don't mind putting minions too much, but they might have 2, so we've got to be slightly careful. But when everyone mulligans like crazy, you tend to assume that they haven't got it. Can't play it. Unlucky.
Kalento decides to just pass here, probably going for a Spirit of the Frog next turn. We see this a lot from pro players on Evolve Shaman, is they will just not do anything in turn 2, even though they could play a Spirit of the Frog, because that extra power level you get from the coin, from being able to use the coin after playing the Spirit of the Frog, is just like so important in this deck that often it is just correct to, you know, wait a turn, save that coin, try to get an extra chance in Evolve or Voltaic Burst, and it often pays out. I think that holding on to the Spirit of the Frog is really important, and I think this is true for like a lot of games in Hearthstone, where instead of trying to go for something as early as possible, you should try to set it up as best as possible, which often means like delaying your game plan by a turn. Another deck where this is very common, I think, is something like Shark Rogue or Vendetta Rogue, depending on the list. You'll often see players like doing these very weird setups for like their Evil Miscreants and Spirit of the Shark, and it'll look weird until the turn where they finally go off, and it's like, I understand now why they're saying this for so long. They get this extra value.
Worth noting here for me that Ukraine didn't do nothing on their turn. They hero powered, which normally is obvious, but I think that's what sparked this early evolve here from Denmark, because they know that Kalento almost certainly has the Flesh Shaper because of how it was played. If you don't have the Flesh Shaper, you probably don't hero power that.
At the same time, there might be like the next level play where if you hero power, then your opponent cannot always play a Mogu Flesh Shaper the next turn. There's only 3 minions in play, and Mogu Flesh Shaper costs 4, so they would need a Voltaic Burst to actually activate it. So sometimes hero powering will just save you 2 life in the long run.
Yes. Yeah, it's always the opening turns. Not only have they got the actual gameplay going on, but that part of it's always quite interesting to me, because I'm thrilling like that.
I think from Kalento's side, he's always playing. There's actually a pretty interesting decision here, because you could just Lightning Storm from Kalento's perspective here. It's actually not that bad of a Lightning Storm.
Yep. That's what he's going to do, deciding that there's no urgent hurry. I know Gia described playing Token Shaman as like playing A in Battlegrounds, where you just don't do anything for 2 or 3 turns and then you kill everybody. And wow, they are so out of stuff.
At the same time, though, Kalento is kind of out of stuff too, in a sense. That's actually not true at all. But for next turn, they're going to be overloaded, which means they can't really do anything besides hero power. They could go coin Spirit of the Frog if they'd like to, but I think that would be a pretty poor use of their resources. So I think Denmark will still have like 1 extra turn here of being able to like fight for board before it's really going to feel bad for them. So like hero power pass here is not going to be the end of the world that it normally is in this kind of matchup.
Yes, no danger in hero powering. Try and set up a Stormbringer for turn 6 at the moment.
It does seem like that's going to be their game plan. Set up a Stormbringer as early as possible. Oh, but Thunderhead picked off the top.
Well, that might tempt them to coin the frog now. Even though it's losing the coin, which loses you a card, it is saving you 2 mana. Because obviously
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Turn.
You do not need that extra value now. It's going to be only about tempo, and they have the tempo. Zap does nothing.
Wow.
I think this is going to be locked up for Ukraine. We're going to go to a game 5, most likely.
It's looking really ridiculously grim right now. I mean, next turn is just absolutely insane for Kalento. And there is a Lightning Storm in Denmark's deck. There's 2 Lightning Storms in Denmark's deck. Just looking at things that might work, but there's going to need to be a huge amount of high rolling on one side and low rolling on the other for it to come off.
Manatee Totem probably does not do enough here.
Yeah, it's probably not the worst, but yeah.
You need card draw, but that's really not going to help.
Well, there's the Lightning Storm part 1 of the equation, which is drawing it. Now you need Ukraine to have an incredibly poor turn, and then the Lightning Storm probably has to high roll. But apart from that, they're standing great.
Yeah, there needs to be like 8 things that go their way, and then they're fine. They're fine.
Yeah, and then they're in the game. I don't think they're even fine at that point.
Yeah, 8 things need to go their way, and then they have like a 1% to win. Could they like hero power Stormbringer on turn 8 and get just some random legendary that wins them the game?
I mean,
That's really
yes.
where they need to be, right?
I love it when that's my game plan. Very, very experienced in these situations. Him and Fury Hunter gets on really well as well. So they're treating this with the staying lightheartedness that really helps actually in team tournaments. If you both stay relaxed and enjoying yourselves as much as you can when you're getting crushed like this.
There might even be a world where Polento does not evolve these Voltaic Burst because, you know, maybe the only way you actually lose is Doomsayer off this.
Yeah, Freddy's praying for it. And it's
Not a
there.
Doomsayer.
2 2s, 3 2s and a 3. And a Voltaic Burst.
If
And is that,
everything
they
went,
can clear quite a lot of this.
if everything went optimally, I think they can clear
I wonder.
everything but a 6/6 and a 3/6. If
Well, if
that's
they can
right.
roll a spell totem first.
That would still leave them in a spot where they can clear everything but a 6/6 and a 3/6. Or they can clear the 6/6 instead of the 5/5 now.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
so
it's
they can
looking
lightning
like-
storm everything for 4.
Oh, but with the zap too,
Zap a
they can
thing
actually
and
clear quite a
Voltaic
bit of the
Burst and
board, yeah.
stuff. Yeah. I mean, this is that 1% just to get in the game that we were talking about.
Yes, the 1% to get in the game. It starts with a spell power totem. There's a
There
spell
it
power
is.
totem. It makes it a lot
And
easier,
nice getting
actually.
a Sea Giant as well. Lovely. Right, how much of this did they get rid of?
That's pretty good.
This is happening! Wow.
I mean, they're actually kind of back in the game, like you were saying.
I mean, yeah, this is now the situation that I didn't think would happen that gives them some sort of outside chance.
This is definitely not the normal scenario that would happen from that spot. All right. I mean, Kalendo still has a lot of power plays here. He can value trade this this Blood Witch if he'd like to, and then evolve it with a Switchy Lackey. That's pretty powerful. He could also just try to go for a chance at a Taunt Totem here.
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't mind. Something like not Voltaic Burst, excuse me. You're gonna have to remind me. Totemic Smash. You could Totemic Smash.
So yeah,
for
sorry,
1/1,
yeah.
and then Hero Power, which gives him a pretty high likelihood of rolling a Taunt Totem, and he can still evolve his 3/2 if he'd like to.
Yeah, I was thinking that was a burst, and of course it's a smash, having made the point 10 times beforehand. That's not a taunt.
Roll the Shark. That's just a 2/2.
So what can they... Oh my goodness.
Well, they cannot deny a Bloodlust from clearing this 8/8.
And of course they overloaded so much last time.
They can play the Moga Flesh Shaper, clear the Grawl the Shark, but Kalento will still have the option to Bloodlust if he'd like to.
If you can connect face here, or if you choose to connect face here, which you should, I think.
I think from Denmark's side, they should always connect face if they can, but...
Because
with
then
them
they
losing
only need
Bleed-
a
Go ahead.
tiny board, yeah. They'll only need a tiny board. As they roll the taunt totem as well. Yeah, they would only need a tiny board to get the Bloodlust through now. Whether they ever get that board is another question.
Kalento can clear this 8/8 guaranteed, but he gives up a lot of his power here. If he wants to clear that 8/8, what's going to need to happen is the Grawl the Shark, no matter what, will have to hit the Sea Giant. There's no way to keep the Grawl the Shark alive and clear the Sea Giant. If he wants to use the Healing Totem and the Witchy Lackey, that's going to be 1+6. That's only 7. So the Evolve can no longer hit a 6-drop.
And if they don't clear it, they're dead to Bloodlust.
Exactly. So they have to clear it, which means the Grawl the Shark can no longer be mutated or evolved.
Yeah.
There is little time.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate the way it works out for them, actually. And this is back to game on now.
Yeah, because Freddy B can suddenly start getting value off of his Stormbreaker. Maybe, you know, the game is going to go on for quite a few more turns. If he picks up a Desert here suddenly, you know, Stormbreaker is active again.
And on the other side of it, Ukraine do have the board, and will probably keep the board.
Desert here. So they have a turn. They're not going to take any damage this turn. They just saw a Bloodlust, which means that it's very unlikely that they're going to die for quite a while. If they just load up on board, like on turn 9, Desert Hare, Mogu, Flesh Shaper, and Stormbringer, they're going to have 4 legendaries in play that Kalento is going to have to deal with.
The decision is, do you want to Mogu now, just in case Kalento wants to do that himself? So next turn you can set up with 3 legendaries next turn, and just Hero Power Mogu here if you wanted to, just to take out that totem, keep the board size small, and then next turn, sure, you've got 1 less thing, and you've kind of wasted a Mogu.
I think at this point, Denmark wants to play for as much value as possible. They've seen so many high-value things from Kalento's side now that you could pretty much estimate that they might be out of it. It's pretty funny that his hand is going to be Spirit of the Frog and Thunderhead, though. But I believe from their side, holding on to this Mogu is going to be pretty important. They get an extra entire legendary out of it, and they still get that value trade value.
Now they've rolled a Taunt Totem. They've rolled first to help their decision. Now they've rolled the Taunt Totem. I think they'll go for the Mogu because it's quite hard to kill it. So they decided, they were having the same discussion we were having, rolled the totem to see what it was, and now it's a taunt. The Mogu is quite hard to kill, so they can get away. They actually go for everything.
That's pretty weird to me, not gonna lie. I feel like holding on to it for the Stormbringer next turn makes a lot of sense. Does Ukraine run a Stormbringer in their deck list of their own?
Let me find it. If they don't, I'd assume they do, but if they don't, no, they do.
They do? Okay, so Spirit of the Frog, Bloodlust could find them a Stormbringer of their own if they'd like to.
Wow.
It's pretty interesting how the Bloodlust can find the Stormbringer. Usually you're using Bloodlust to like just kill the other person, so it doesn't come up that often, but here it might be important for Kalento to do that. You get the extra value in the late game by doing that.
What to do?
So they need to kill off... Every hare is 4 damage with a Bloodlust, so they need to kill off all but 2 of the hares to just not be dead next turn, or evolve into a taunt. Or roll a taunt.
Little time.
So they have to kill stuff here.
I wonder.
If they're going to Thunderhead, they're not doing it.
Unless this comes up as a... not this, anyway.
It looks like Kalento is still alive here.
Totemic Smash.
Yeah.
Getting the Taunt Totem and setting up the Bloodlust isn't lethal.
Lickham doesn't set it up. Although it is pretty funny because if they had not rolled a Taunt Totem here, Lickham would have been exact lethal. They would have had 4 + 6 from the Bloodlust and then 1 extra from the Lickham. So, you know.
And it's actually a horrible pickup. Any minion would have been fine here.
That's pretty funny because, like, you know, they had a very real chance of actually just winning the game from the spot that we said was all but over.
Yeah, I mean, I was basically joking with my turn of events that I thought could get them into it, and it's exactly what happened. I wasn't actually expecting it to occur.
I'd be shocked if they don't not Bloodlust here. Bloodlust clears up the entire board. Gives them a Stormbringer as well.
Yeah. And then there's trouble, back in trouble for Denmark after this crazy game of Hearthstone. But they didn't have to lay everything out on the board here. They could have held back their hair at least and guaranteed themselves their own good Stormbringer. The Mogu play was a bit more debatable, I feel. But actually playing the hair, it just seemed like they were looking at the Bloodlust and not the long-term win of just playing the Stormbringer on turn 9.
Yes and no, right? Because we're in a spot where Kalento rolled that, where he rolled the Taunt Totem. Based on the way that Denmark actually played that turn, they set themselves up to actually have lethal with the Lickum pickup if there was no Taunt Totem. So I can't really fault them. I think that they got pretty massively punished because of that Taunt Totem pickup from Ukraine side, but I in the long run, I don't actually think it was a bad play.
Yeah, I mean, the side you're putting across there is the side where you try to use your Bloodlust to win, and if it doesn't, you try and find a way for your Stormbringer to win instead, which is a fair way of doing it, using both the cards in your hand, whereas the way I was suggesting really only uses the Stormbringer.
What to do?
Spirit of the Frog here. Bloodlust is not going to do anything in any way. Won't do any damage, and will not pick up a Stormbringer. We already saw the Stormbringer from Freddy B's side. He's going to hope that he stays alive.
It's a stealth minion that can be bloodlusted. Great. But that's the thing.
I mean, from here, even an Overload card, if they don't pick up a taunt from this Stormbringer, Freddy's just going to have the win here. The Crystal Smith's Kangor is going to change that by a bit, but it still leaves up Lightning Bolt to be lethal.
And here's the stuff.
There's a Tyrion. Okay.
Yeah, there's everything.
I think that's going to lock it out.
Yep, it's going to be 2 games apiece. And the curse of the 2-0 lead with Token Shadow happened to USA. Did I mention the USA loss last week? Last week. And Ukraine trying to make it happen to Denmark this week. But to do it,
Denmark still has a pretty favorable matchup, I would say. So far, they've seen an unfavored and a mirror match, and their last match is going to be a favored in the Reno Hunter. So even though they've lost 2 in a row, I still would put them as pretty favorites to win this series.
Yeah, Reno Hunter, extremely basic build, well, basic, straightforward, nothing basic, about 30 unique. Card we're seeing a lot more these days. I think Urzatron wasn't in all of the builds originally, from what I remembered at least, but it's there all the time.
It looks
and we
like
are turn 1.
Yeah, we skipped a little bit of this game so far, but not too much. Freddy B obviously just going to be playing a Sludge Flipper turn 1. Kalento is going to respond with a Spring Claw.
How irritating is Rat Trap for this deck? It seems to do a lot of things in one turn. You're just going to see that set up next turn for the Frog?
I think it depends a lot on what the Shaman's game plan is in the early game. If they have something like the Desert Hare Evolve, then they don't really need to worry too much about it. But if they have something like a Spirit of the Frog, then it becomes quite a big problem. From Freddy's side, neither of those are really in play right now. His hand is a bit too much air, I would say. He still needs to find that Spirit of the Frog or that Desert Hare. So I guess the Rat Trap won't really affect him, but that's only because he's not going to be playing anything until he finds one of those 2 cards.
Hunter does play quite a lot of small stuff early, so Lightning Storm's tempted, but their hand is kind of weak, so they may go for the reaction just to draw themselves something that works with this, because they've nearly got a fantastic hand. And there is that Rat Trap.
Not the cards you want to be seeing as the Evolved Shaman.
No. The real power in this deck, apart from the obvious turns which we all know, the Evolved Hare, really lies in how good its draws are after about turn 4, though.
Did you catch much of the the Global Finals broadcast?
Yes. Not going to claim I can remember it all, but yes, I caught it all.
There was one game that this reminds me of specifically. Well, okay, Spirit of the Frog is picked up. That's going to be pretty huge for Denmark's side. But there was one game that this reminded me of specifically, which I believe was RNG Lee versus Bloody Face in the semifinals. Lee was on Evolve Shaman, and it was a game where he just had no gas for the entire game. He drew, Mutate, Zap, Evolve, Spirit of the Murloc, or Soul of the Murlocs, but that continued for like several more turns, and he just got ran over. It doesn't happen often with the Evolve Shaman, but if they do draw these like dead hands, there's really nothing that they can do. It's a problem that we've seen stuff like Miracle Rogue have in the early games of Hearthstone, where if you just have a handful of air, like preps and backstabs, it doesn't matter like how powerful Gadget Set Auctioneer is if you don't draw it, right? So it's good that Freddy actually did find the Spirit of the Frog here. It's going to be really important.
And in the next game, we are going to see Greece, who have brought Haunting Visions to their deck. And that might be just a nod to those terrible draws. If that card is your second Lightning Storm or whatever, and it's always in your hand, and you always think you don't want it, you change it for another card that just draws you a card.
If you're very optimistic, Haunting Visions is a Lightning Storm that can also be a draw engine.
Sure.
You have to be very optimistic.
I understand the mentality of it, though. This hasn't got a lot better. I mean, obviously the frog helps, but...
I think there's a pretty interesting decision this turn to zap the 3/4. If you want to play around Rat Trap but still draw cards, you can still play a card this turn while not activating the Rat Trap. So, if they want to just zap now, play around that Rat Trap, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's giving respect to your opponent to zap now.
Yeah. Yeah, when your opponent is Kalento and no ear, you should probably give them some respect as well. Oh!
Deadly shot.
Yeah. And you've seen your opponents already panic and draw a card and then play the frog the next turn. Taking it slow and just deadly shotting this seems like a very good way to set up your game to me.
There have been some fortunate top decks for Ukraine this series. Brawl as Control Warrior versus Evolve Shaman, and that deadly shot as well. And look at Freddy's hand. It's just so much of it is. This goes back to what we were talking about, where the Evolve Shaman does not draw like one of the couple cards that make the deck tick, stuff like Desert Hare and stuff like Spirit of the Frog, or if that stuff gets answered, they're really left with a handful of nothing.
Kalento seems to be enjoying himself, though. That's the happy Kalento face.
You don't see it very often.
Yeah, you can tell the difference from the sad Kalento face because he's winning. That's the only difference.
Kalento's a pretty stoic character in terms of Hearthstone. Some people kind of wear their emotions on their sleeve. People like RDU, if you ever watch RDU play, he gets very happy and very sad, but Kalento just has a very small range of emotions. So if you see him smile, that means the game is going incredibly well for him, and I would say this game is going incredibly well for him. Yeah,
he did get quite happy, especially mainly on Twitter rather than immediately in the interview. But when he won the Star Ladder Invitational early in the year, it was the first biggish one he'd won in a while, and he was saying it was really nice to get a big win.
That's the pickup. If you needed a card to win this game, it's going to be Desert Hare.
So, Pressure Plate and Rat are both in play here, depending what you want to do.
I wonder.
What that says to me is maybe just Hero Power Evolve makes the most sense. You give up this Mogu Flesh Shaper here for a slightly higher thing. At the same time, you could say, well, if they get a 6/6 and I get an 8/8, I come out ahead.
Yeah, and I get to kill off a 3/2. They don't know it's Pressure Plate, I don't think, either. It's only just been played. So they would be hoping it's not Pressure Plate.
I mean, even here you can see them debating whether they want to attack the 3/2 or not. It could proc the Snake Trap or the Freezing Trap, so only 1 in 3 times is actually a Pressure Plate here.
I feel you've come this far, you've got to do it, and you get the chance to mutate something.
What's the 5-drop? Oh no! They could have actually killed the 3/2 and get 2 extra 1/1s.
Yeah, Freddy's
That's brutal.
absolutely distraught over that.
That's actually going to be so important in this game as well. Look at their hand. They have Sea Giants, and they have 2 Sea Giants as well. They also have a Soul of the Murloc. 2 extra 1/1s here would be fighting so much better than where they are right now.
Yeah, it's incredible, the difference.
Suddenly, Kalento has the option to go something like Coin Mat with Divine Shield and Rush, just kill off this 6/6. He gets to take a value trade over this 3/4 with that Rat, and the 3/2 and the 1/1s can clear the Violet Teacher. Suddenly, Kalento is just so far ahead. Freddy will be left with only a single 1/1 at the end of this turn because he did not get that trade-off.
It's so huge. And it's amazing how that works
It's
out.
enormous.
You know, I don't want to see Freddy make a mistake on stream, but also it's always nice to highlight just how big your decisions are in Hearthstone. I don't think it's his fault as such. You're communicating with teammates. There's so much going on. It wasn't an easy turn to navigate with all the secrets.
Oh, he can just full clear the board. Yeah, like this is an optimization on that, but like this just goes back to not that single trade that he missed leaves him with such a bad board state. I know what you mean. When you're playing in team tournaments and 2 players are arguing what to do, you can often be left in this like very hard situation where you want to respect the opinion of the person that you're playing with, but you also need to make a decision. A lot of times it can lead to like these weird roping scenarios.
And the opposite is true as well. Sometimes if you're double checking too thoroughly with your teammate, just trust yourself and go.
Yeah.
Even if you're agreeing, it's just sometimes it's just like, yes, I agree. It might be pressure plate. Okay, that's 10 seconds gone, just fiddling around.
And I honestly think this is one of the strengths of Secrets versus really good players. We often see people saying, oh, the best players in the world can play around Secrets way better than like the average player can. But at the same time, if you have like a really strange looking board state that a player has to beat, the really good player sometimes might overthink things. They might try to think of like the optimal way to play around every single secret, and suddenly, you know, like the rope can affect them, like we just saw in this game.
You find it with decks that have mind control tech as well. Sometimes it's just best to be stupid and ignorant and just throw your cards out there. If they have it, they have it.
Yeah. Kalento's going to have a pretty weak turn here, but I don't think he needs to have strong turns for the rest of the game.
Right.
You know, as long as he gets to turn 9, gets that Call of the Wild down, I have to imagine he's going to be in smooth waters the rest of this game.
It is double elimination, this group, so if Denmark do get punished here, we'll have another chance in the lower bracket later on today.
They'll be playing as the 3rd match, I believe. Let me double check.
Yeah, they're playing winners before lower.
Yeah, they'll be playing as the 4th match today against the loser of Greece and Russia if they lose this game.
Loading up. Anything they could. There's a Call of the Wild coming, so it doesn't hurt to have a big board. It never hurts to have a big board against Shaman anyway. And of course, what we're seeing that we're sort of ignoring because Ukraine is still having to make decisions is we know how bad this hand is. Kalento still has to treat it as if there might be real Hearthstone cards in hand.
This kill command is just going to be lethal.
Yep, with hero power, 20 damage.
1 over.
And that's twice we've seen in the last 2 weeks. Token Shaman failed to get it done with a 2-0 lead. Again, it's been doing fine. The deck's performing as expected mostly. But Ukraine get themselves into that level.
But I mean,
goes to next week.
But that's that point, right? It's a little bit hard to say because we saw both like really good plays from Denmark, and I'd say some pretty bad plays from them as well in the 2 series. You know, in one game where they lost, we said that they had 1% to win, 1% to even get in the game, and suddenly they found themselves in a spot where if the Totemic Smash didn't find a Taunt Totem or the Hero Power didn't find a Taunt Totem, they actually had lethal. So in one of the games that they lost, you know, they were at 50% or approximately to actually get that lethal. And then in the final game that we saw where they lost, it wasn't the deck that caused that, if you know what I mean. They had that one opportunity to actually, yeah. It's just sometimes like I do think that Evolve Shaman, you can find yourself in a lot of strange board states, and you need to be able to on the fly like figure those out as quickly as possible. And they just were 2 or 3 seconds off from figuring that out at the very end. So yes, Evolve Shaman did not get the win here, but I do not think that was necessarily the deck being of weak power level as the reason.
And it's interesting because I noticed that Freddie, throughout that last 3 games, he wasn't scared to hover over a minion whilst it was still evolving or whatever to see if it had charge. He was doing that, or rush. He was doing that all the time. And there he had 2 things to do because he was trying to mutate the Defender of Argus. He didn't have time after that animation resolved to also check what else had happened during the turn, and that's because he hasn't left enough time. At the level that Freddie plays, I'm willing to say that. If he was a worse player, I'd say it was unfortunate to not have enough time, but he knows better than that, and I feel sorry for him there. And Ukraine go on. So, without further ado, let's find out who they're going to be playing against as we get into game number 2 in just a moment.